Hi, I'm Travis Howell, and I'm a doctoral student here in the business school at UNC. I'm also a grant recipient of the Kenan Institute. And today I'm going to be talking about an important question that every entrepreneur faces, which is, should I be a solo founder or should I find co-founders? Right? So I've had lots of students ask me this question, lots of entrepreneurs ask me this question. Also, if you just go online and do a simple search, there's countless number of entrepreneurial blogs and online community chats about this question. All entrepreneurs have to deal with this at some point. Should I find co-founders or not? It's hard to think of a more consequential decision. Now, if you look at it, there is research showing that on average, larger founding teams will outperform smaller founding teams. And the logic makes sense, right? When you have more founders, you have more resources, right? You have more skills, you have more connections, you have more money. So on average, we would expect larger founding teams to outperform smaller founding teams. And this is backed up by a lot of examples we see in practice, where a lot of the largest and most successful companies in the world were founded by teams of co-founders and not solo founders, right? So think Google, think Apple, think Microsoft, again, all founded by teams and not individuals. So again, we would expect, on average, larger founding teams to outperform smaller founding teams. But that doesn't mean, just because on average that's the case, that doesn't mean solo founders can't make it. We see examples of this. So you look at Jeff Bezos at Amazon, look at Dell, look at eBay. There are examples of solo founders who make it. So the question is, if that's the case, when is it possible to be a solo founder? And actually, is it even sometimes better? Is it preferable to be a solo founder over co-founders? Because if you look at this other research, there's some great research by Noam Wasserman and others who have shown that up to 65% of startup failures are due to conflicts among co-founders, right? So even though co-founders do bring extra resources, they can also bring extra problems, right? So it's possible that they are more harmful than helpful under certain conditions. However, there's not a lot of research distinguishing between solo-founded ventures and co-founded ventures. We don't know when is it best to be a solo founder. So that's the question that me and my co-author, Chris Bingham, set out to investigate. So Chris Bingham, he's a faculty member here at UNC as well. And we went out and interviewed over 100 people, 100 solo founders and 100 co-founders, and tried to figure out what is the difference, what makes one succeed, and what's best for the other. And what we found is it was very interesting. We found, consistent with past research, the co-founded ventures in our sample did outperform the solo-founded ventures. So again, we would expect this, right? On average, more founders means more resources, more skills, more connections, etc. However, that was only the case when conflict in the team was low. So we saw several examples where conflict came up among the co-founders and it just paralyzed the venture. Some of them even went to business court and had severe problems. It was people problems, right? It wasn't even company problems. The idea was great. They had lots of resources, but they just couldn't get it together within the founding team, right? So again, co-founders did great in our sample unless there was conflict, and then they just tanked. And so then the question is, well, what about the solo founders? What helps solo founders to succeed? And this was perhaps the most interesting part that we found, which was that the successful solo founders that we saw were not actually solo. So they did not have co-founders in the traditional sense, but they did have what we are calling co-creators. So what's a co-creator? So one example is an employee. And you might ask, well, what's the difference between a co-founder and an employee? And there's a lot we could go into here, but in short, in addition to the compensation differences, where employees get compensated through salary and co-founders through equity and voting rights, the relationship between founder and employee is very different than between founder and co-founder. You get a lot of the positives without getting a lot of the negatives. So a lot of the solo founders found ways to hire employees rather than get co-founders. In addition to employees, another type of co-creator is an alliance partner. So again, a lot of these solo founders did not go out and find co-founders, but they did go out and form alliances, maybe with another startup organization, maybe with a larger organization, and that's how they sourced, the resources that they needed. So instead of co-founders, alliance partners. And again, another type of co-creator that we saw was what we were calling a benefactor. So a benefactor, there were several examples in our data, but a benefactor is someone who provides some significant resource to the entrepreneur, but with no expectation of being compensated. These are usually friends or family members who have some personal interest in the entrepreneur, right? And so we saw several examples of these benefactors providing enough resources to the solo founder where they didn't even need co-founders. So to wrap up, when do you need a co-founder and when do you need solo founders? Well, what we found is that co-founders, although they are beneficial, they're not always necessary. And in fact, sometimes they're detrimental. A lot of the solo founders we saw were able to source a lot of these same resources, but through different vehicles, right? And so the successful solo founders are not actually solo. They don't have co-founders, but they have these co-creators. So if you are an entrepreneur trying to decide what to do, think to yourself, do you have access to co-creators? If so, it might actually be even a better option than a co-founder. Because again, you get a lot of the positives without a lot of the negatives, like the drama that comes with co-founders, having to give up control and equity to them. So again, if you're an entrepreneur, think about what do you have access to? Do you have access to these co-creators, or would it be better to find co-founders? And if so, watch out for that intra-team conflict, because it can destroy the venture.